conversation here in studio has already begun. Before I hand over to Michael to introduce his panel, we want to quickly remind you of our Twitter question, and we're asking you, how do you meet the cost of healthcare? This is, of course, hours ahead of the budget reading, which will happen tomorrow. We'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, on top of that, it's also time for press review. We're going to take a look at some of the local dailies. Of course, we'll start with the Standard and give you a general overview of what is being discussed. Of course, the NYS scandal, which has taken top and center stage for the past 2 weeks, is still there. How Ngirita topped NYS Investigator, amongst other things we're about to dive into. But first of all, let Michael introduce his panel. Michael? Thank
you very much, Zinzi. And joining me this morning, we have Koki Ocheng, who's a lecturer for Media Studies and Communication at USIU. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. We also have Honorable Yusuf Hassan, who's a Member of Parliament for Kamkunji. Thank you for joining us, sir. And well, straight to the dailies, and we'll start with the Standard's headline, which is How Ngirita's Toppled NYS Investigator. This is, well, a story that's taking twists and turns that are very interesting. But also, since today is Wednesday and we normally get into the newsroom, I'd like to just get your comments and your feel on how we have covered this particular story before we expand it to corruption as a whole. Let me start with you, Koki.
I think I know the term now, all that Ngiritas is not good. At least I know that. But I think the way the story is unfolding is more about, yes, they have been incarcerated or they are in remand, and what is the intrigues in between. And of course, when it becomes apparent that there is somebody investigating the case involved in the very corruption, of course, then that brings us to other questions as to whether, you know, it is a true, it's going to reflect the true impression of what happened in this corruption case. And I think it's become apparent every year that there will be big cases, but the question is, where will that money come from? Where will it be brought back to the budget, to the coffers? Are we going to see some action taken on everybody? Are we going to interrogate everybody involved and have some action against them? Or is it just going to be one of those things that we hear ever since Goldenberg? We've been hearing there is a big... Yes, exactly.
All right, Mheshimiwa, your thoughts on this and an interesting turn of events here with the lead investigator apparently involved. Initially, he denied. Then now he says that all he did was take a loan from the Ngiritas, and those deposit slips that they presented were merely him paying back his loan or getting the loan from him. Does that concern you that this is taking that turn at this point in time?
Yes, indeed. It is quite an interesting story. I mean, it's dramatic. It's got all the elements of a soap opera. But at the same time, it also underpins how deep-rooted our culture of corruption and impunity is, that here is a government official whose job is to investigate, is enmeshed in this particular corrupt case. And it's interesting how the journalists have followed it and broken the story to the point that he has now been forced to admit that, in fact, he's part of the problem. It doesn't really matter whether he was a partner or whether he was given a loan. He's a culprit, he's a villain.
And there's already conflict of interest, right?
Absolutely, exactly. Absolutely. And he should have stepped aside long before he was removed. And that's a major problem that we have in Kenya. It appears as if nobody in this country takes responsibility for anything. Even the officer in charge of a particular office does not accept responsibility. It doesn't mean that you're actually, you stole the money or you're part of the scandal, but the fact that you're the supervising officer, you're in charge.
That should have come out right from the word go. Even if he's not guilty and even if it was clean business, whatever. At that point in time should have been the point where he says, look, I already have a relationship, a business relationship with these people, therefore I absolve myself.
So there is no culture of, you know, the moral position. We don't take a moral position. We don't have an ethical position. It is just a selfish stand which the person says, I'm not guilty. Somebody is trying to finish me off. I'm not going to move. And unless we can change that culture, that mentality, that mindset, we will not go very far in fighting corruption.
And you know, government officers are well trained. They know when to step aside. They know what will be of conflict of interest. They have all these, the public service ethics guide, and it is elaborate. So it would be unfortunate that he would not look at it as a risk on his part, because then if these people were going to come out, of course, then he's in the front page of the newspaper.
Absolutely.
Michael, if I may ask our panel this morning, that leads me to my next question. A lot of people have said that these new findings that we've gotten with NYS is the downfall of these investigations. There's no one who's going to be convicted. No one will be prosecuted. Mheshimiwa, what do you think?
No, I don't think so. I don't agree with that. Just because there is one rotten egg does not. I don't think the Director of Public Prosecutions would have taken a case of this kind to court without having a very strong case. And the mistakes of one individual may have kind of affected the case in some ways. But it certainly would not derail the prosecution that is going on.
Yeah, I think the suspects have a case to answer as to where they got that kind of money, how they moved it in and out of their accounts. The banks also have a case to answer. Right. So it's not just a matter of, okay, this one person had a demeanor and a misdemeanor, and therefore the case collapsed.
Right, and that is the reason, in fact, why the culprits have brought him in. In fact, they want, this story has two sides to it. It was necessarily not exposed through investigation, but because the Ngiritas wanted to discredit the case, wanted to say that this case is not clean, it's not tight, because there is someone whom we have done business with. So the whole idea of exposing this story in some ways is try to undermine
the case. And I guess one of the things that, or the arguments that have been there, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, is the fact that the Ngiritas are probably the tail end of the whole scam. And if the investigators could use them more for information, it is allowed, I think, within the law for them to trade information for maybe some form of freedom, because for that amount of money to move from a government account, there certainly are people at the top who are involved. The Ngiritas might be a lead to that. This being one, if you look at it like a rope that you're pulling, maybe this is just one of the people involved, but possibly going to a higher level.
Shouldn't that be negotiated in the courts and in the prosecution office? It shouldn't be negotiated in the newspaper.
Not in the newspaper.
No. I don't think that it would, take them away from accessing that money, because they still have a case to answer.
Absolutely.
In my opinion. And even if they come to a compromise or, spell out other people in the chain, they'll still have to face the consequences of having that kind of money and not explaining the route.
All right. Before we move from there, Mheshimiwa, you wanted to say something?
Plea bargaining is a tradition, well-established tradition in investigations that you get someone to spill the beans, and they get either an amnesty or a lenient sentence. Yeah. And I think that could be an opportunity for the investigators and the prosecutors to be able to get hooked. Because I think to a certain extent, a lot of people are saying the people now we're seeing in court are the mules. Corruption is like drug. There's a big faceless person behind it, and these are purely mules or people who the cannon fodder they were using to transport the supplies to the market. But they're really not the owners.
All right, we'll wait and see how that goes.
Well, Michael, on page 7 of the Standard this morning, still on the aspect of the NYS, the topic reads, Uhuru's kin got millions from the NYS diesel deal. For the sake of our audience, allow me to just read a paragraph or two to give you a highlight of this specific story. A close relative of President Uhuru Kenyatta was among suppliers who were paid millions of shillings by the National Youth Service, Paul Gathesha Muhoho Company, Petro Kenya Oil Company Limited made 68 million this year for supplying diesel to NYS. Michael, this just brings me to one of the biggest questions that we ask year in, year out, especially since President Kenyatta took office, and that is Uhuru's ability to fight graft, knowing that it starts from within his inner circles. From 2013, he seemed very passionate about it. 2015, 2016, he became a bit timid about it. Now he's talking tough talk, but it is those around him that seem to be the suspects. Mheshimiwa?
Well, I mean, there is no one above the law. I mean, it doesn't really matter whether you're the brother of the
president,
the president,
right,
or you are the father of a member of parliament, or you are the cousin of the Chief Justice. We're all equal under the law, and I think people are looking to make sure that, in fact, justice is done by bringing all of those people who are involved in corruption, regardless of their relationships, to book. And I think that is what Kenyans are looking for. It doesn't really matter who you are. And it doesn't, it doesn't mean that my brother or my cousin who has done something wrong necessarily reflects on me. I mean, I think there should be a clear separation, because every individual has responsibility towards what they do. I mean, there's the constant.
Maybe also looking at it from a reportage point of view, just the headline here, Uhuru King got millions from NYS diesel deal. And there could be a feeling that the president's kin are not supposed to be in business. It could be clean business.
No, but first look at the story. Whose picture is on it?
Yes, I
was wondering. I looked at
who is a former chairman of the youth fund.
Of the youth fund, not even NYS. Anyway, I think, like Mheshimiwa says, really, if it is something that did not follow the tendering process, because from reading the story, I saw it went to court and he was awarded. So there must have been legalities in the way he got the tender, and the story should be in what happened in court, what was said and what happened, and therefore then we can be able to pass judgment whether it was a corrupt dealing or not. And secondly, I think it is actually it's not really fair. Every time somebody who is in Kenya, we are all related, isn't it? More or less. So if every other relative of mine did something and it would be attributed to me without, looking at the details of the issue, what was the business, was the tender process followed, etc., etc., and I see it was a court case. So there must have been facts. So I think the journalist or whoever was reporting should have looked at those facts. Yeah.
Michael, away from this whole graft issue, another story that has kept Kenyans glued, especially on newspapers and TV screen, is the announcement that Sonko made of when he suggested Miguna as his DP. On page 29 of the Standard this morning, Sonko suffers setback as the MCAs reject Miguna. So Governor Mike Sonko seems that he will have to go back to the drawing board and look for someone new to nominate, another person to position to deputize him after his Miguna one fell off. Mheshimiwa, the fact that, to begin off with, that Sonko would then front Miguna to be his deputy, would have that relationship worked in the first place?
I really don't know. I mean, I can't speak for Sonko and for Miguna, but I think what has happened in this particular case is a legal lacuna. There is a gap in the legal system that we never put into provisions for how a deputy governor is going to be selected if he or she either resigns or dies in office. And then it was left to the courts. And then the courts decided under the circumstances that the governor, the sitting governor, is allowed to nominate his deputy and subject to an election in the assembly, in the county assembly, then that person becomes the deputy governor. So I think Sonko did absolutely nothing wrong in selecting whoever he wanted, because he has the
rights to do that.
Yes, he has the powers under the law. And he chose whoever he wanted to. So what we should be looking at now is bringing in an amendment in the law to create a better way of selecting a deputy, because the deputy governor and the governor and the deputy governor are a package. People elect them through a popular vote system, and therefore it should not be left to an individual to select the deputy governor. The law should be very clear on how, if something happens, how the deputy governor can be replaced.
Koki, speaking of a package, who do you think would be your ideal character? What in your mind do you see as an ideal character fitted to interlock and complement Sonko? Polycarp was, people said he was fantastic for the corporate world.
It looked like the dream team at that time,
exactly.
but unfortunately it didn't work out.
No, I can't give any package because I don't know how the package
I would say that I wouldn't agree with that, that it was a dream package, because at the end of the day, running a county is a political matter. And you need to have someone who is a politician with good management skills, good administrative skills. But to mix a populist governor with a technocrat, normally it would not work. Right. Because after all, the governor says...
And we've seen that even in Kiambu County.
Yes, I have been elected. Yes, I am the elected governor. And now you're asking me to defer to my deputy. You wouldn't expect, nobody would accept that.
I think the question is, what is the role of the deputy governor? Really, if Sonko has run the county without a deputy governor all this time, I'm just beginning to question, is it a necessary position? Because what will be his role there? Therefore, we can actually do without them, and that would be the first place to start on cutting down on resources that you're spending.
And the wage bill, which is quite huge.
And secondly, I think the question we should be asking, which is more valid, is why the MCs are, not taking Miguna. Of course, we know there's that controversy, but you have to go back to the law, the dual citizenship issue, what merits to be a leader. We go to chapter 6, look at integrity. Does Miguna merit or not? Those are the questions that we should be asking. And like he said, what is the track record? Yes, you're a politician, but what's your track record? What can we see that you've done previously that we can really say you are worthy of that position?
Koki, I love that statement you've made, because actually the second paragraph says, and I quote, Article 78 of the Constitution provides that a person is not eligible for election or appointment to a state office unless the person is a citizen of Kenya.
But he was running for governorship. So when does that status change?
That brings another whole debate of his status and also how he ended up being, deported from Kenya.
But the media is not doing a good job on that. It hasn't really investigated. For example, Miguna left this country to go into exile when we had a one-party system, dictatorship. He fled from this country because of political persecution. And not necessarily did he go with his passport. He ended up in Canada, where in order to travel and function, he got a Canadian citizenship. He came back. We allowed him to run for the governorship. And only later came up with this reversed process of saying he was not a Kenyan citizen. And therefore, even for the Nairobi County Assembly to argue that he is not a Kenyan, or he is a dual citizenship holder and therefore cannot stand office, is an afterthought.
It's an afterthought.
Yes. I think it's an important issue, because when do you lose your nationality? I mean, what are some of the... On what grounds, really, if you're a Kenyan?
And what is his status? And I guess that's one thing that we need as a media to dig into and find out the details. But we are running out of time. I'd like us to just look at the headlines of the Daily Nation. At KEBS, makers of fakes run the show. And this is the body that is actually mandated with ensuring that quality is enhanced and that things meet the threshold. And health of Kenyans is at risk as quality agency releases goods certified and fit for human consumption by its scientists into the market. The Kenya Bureau of Standards is buying and issuing fake stamps, aiding the sale of counterfeit and smuggled products. This probably would weigh in on another area of corruption, because again, really, there's somebody making money out of this at the expense of Kenyans' health and lives, really.
It's just...
It's disheartening.
Yes, I'm just... Because I've always held KEBS high, having worked with them through ISO certification of organizations. I expected that, they would deal with an issue of Kenyan lives. For example, telling us not to take sugar, really, because it has poisonous substances, and somebody has passed. What is the problem?
Yet it went through there.
I mean, yeah, I think
so
Kenyans...
who's sleeping on their job?
No, it's not sleeping. It is just being malicious, because it is a moral position you're holding. It's an ethical position you're holding. And you're being paid by the Kenyan taxes to do the right thing. What is so difficult? And we can't argue that maybe they are being paid poorly. You know, we could say maybe police, and it's not the way to look at it. But these are, you know, well-informed public servants who are trained, who are highly qualified, and I can tell you for a fact, having been one before, that Kenyan public service are highly trained, they know their stuff. So it is very unfortunate that they would want to...
Mheshimiwa, just as we wind up, possibly, these are individuals. KEBS as an organization is probably there to do a good job. But again, you find individuals, some few rotten potatoes that literally spoil the whole thing.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of respect for the managing director of KEBS. I think he means well, and he would do well to take action. But on the whole, it's all of these institutions, the Kenya Revenue Authority, the Anti-Counterfeit Agency, KEBS, as they say, all of them have failed us in some way or another because they are dealing with problems when in fact the horse has already bolted. Yeah, the goods are already here. They are in the shops.
They're already being consumed.
And, and they're going around now in an impossible task of trying to go to every warehouse in the country, which is an impossible job. What they should have done is to have the right controls and the right management systems in place to ensure that these goods do not reach the market.
All right, Mhesh, I'm going to have to cut you short there because of time, and I'd like us to release KTN home because the entrepreneur is just about to begin. And right here on KTN News, we're taking a short break. When we come back, we're looking at the budget and more from a reporting point of view from the media. When we talk about a 3 trillion budget, what does that mean? What is 3 trillion? Is that something that can be broken down and made more palatable for the general public to consume and understand? That's what we're going to be looking at, the budget from a reporting point of view. So for KTN Home, the entrepreneur is going to begin in just a bit. For KTN News, we're taking a short break. We'll be right back with the newsroom.